happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 69 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. My name's Kyle Sutherland. As we get to really the last couple of weeks here in the regular season, at least as far as the smaller classifications go, we've still got plenty to discuss. I had a chance to go down to Melissa, Texas over the weekend and check out Bentonville play the Lady Cardinals in a nationally ranked matchup. So, of course, we'll get into that. We'll go ahead and bring in the softball guru, Jared Hawthorn. And Jared, if I can bring him up, there he is. Jared, you got the Three Rivers attire. I know you got also the Cutter Lady Eagles hat. You're kind of doing a little bit of a mix of support here. Of course, the Lady Eagles won at least a share of the 2A7 conference championship last week. Y'all can wrap that up, I guess, as we release this on a Monday. So today, you guys can wrap that up this evening and in undefeated fashion, but you already do have the 1 seed going into the district tournament. So you're repping those Lady Eagles as well as what is ASU Three Rivers' mascot? Oh, hang on. I got you muted. My bad. Or actually, I think you might be muted.
Yeah, my bad.
There you are.
Yeah, I think they're the Lady Eagles too. So
Okay.
we're ripping the Lady Eagles.
There you go. Although I know their head coach is Kelsey Ryan. I just couldn't remember because I think this is their second or third. It's one of the new programs. So yeah, that's just another one of those. Along with, I know recently we did ASU, had some ASU Newport stuff on, and that's along with Three Rivers. That's one of the newer colleges that's getting kids more opportunities to play at the next level. So really good to see that.
Yeah, Coach Ryan is amazing. I've gotten to deal with her a lot over the last couple of years on the recruiting trail and at travel ball tournaments and stuff. And she's actually recruited several kids out of high schools around here that I know. And recently just had a couple kids from Cutter that went down there and played for her, and maybe going to have another one out of this class. She's got a kid out of our class at Cutter that's got an offer and is looking at very possibly going down there for this coming fall. So definitely think the world of her. She's a great coach, and a lot of kids around the state really like her. And that program is starting to grow, and she's starting to pull in. It looks like she's going to have a pretty good class for next year for this fall, and just they do a great job down there. She does a great job down there. Definitely want to give big props to them. For getting me a shirt to wear this week, and I didn't get down there while their bookstore was open where I could get me a hat for Three Rivers. So since I didn't have a Three Rivers hat, I figured I'd rep my Lady Eagles at Cutter, who locked up a share of first place and maybe have a chance to go undefeated in conference. So I figured I'd get them both in there.
No question. Yeah, might as well get a little bit of a double advertising action in there. Speaking of advertising, I want to make sure to give some love to the people that make this show, or to the companies and people that make this show possible during the spring, starting with Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, whether infield renovation, lip removal, and edging, plus much more. Anything you need on a natural surface, call Jeremy Rice. 501-416-1218. That's 501-416-1218. Also, Boom Boom Floor Shine, servicing all of the Southwest Arkansas region. You need some TLC for your VCT or just any kind of basic maintenance. They can take care of all that for you. Again, anywhere in the Southwest Arkansas region, Texarkana all the way up to Hot Springs, they got you covered. And of course, the western part of the state, again, the whole Southwest region, so that whole area. And then also Chinook Cedary, head over to ChinookCedary.com. Whether you like jalapeno ranch, lemon pepper, smokehouse barbecue, any of their 8 flavors you can pick from. You can get the sampler pack or you can get the big bags, but you can type in referral code NSS Media for 10% off of your order. Also, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube if you prefer to watch, or you can get us on if you want the audio versions, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Any of those, we are there. All right, so let's get into it. So I'm sure that any of you that follow, and of course we talked about it on last week's show, but anybody that follows our social media pages or follows me on Twitter or Facebook friends, whatever, you've seen that we covered the Melissa, Texas game, and that has been in the works since about this fall, and Coach Early got that set up. It was initially supposed to be a 2-game series, but ended up only being one, just to having to move some things around. But it was a really good one, and it lived up to the billing. Kind of the point of this was obviously Bentonville was going down there to hopefully upset the consensus number 1 team in the country. Got really close to doing that, but they were not able to pull it out. Melissa won 5-3. The Tigers were actually down 5-1 going into the 7th inning, and they loaded the base. They had put a couple of runs up on the board. They got the bases loaded and just couldn't quite finish it out. But Jared, we'll get into a little bit more specifics of the game here in just a second, but you gotta be very happy. I know that any softball fan has to be extremely happy, regardless of what your feelings are towards Bentonville, whether you're a rival of them, whether you don't just care about them because you're not in their area, whatever the case may be. They helped not just Bentonville, but the state of Arkansas by just taking the taking the Cardinals to the wire and showing not only the state of Texas, our region, but really national softball pundits, essentially, that Arkansas can play. And I know that Bentonville is a special case. Bentonville, is who they are. They're loaded with college prospects every year. But nonetheless, when someone thinks of a certain team from Arkansas, regardless of who it is, you tend to get lumped under one umbrella of like, oh, well, they don't have what we have here, whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying that's what Melissa's thoughts were, but that's what plenty think, regardless of really what sport it is. But Bentonville really went down there and they showed that they can compete with just about anybody.
I was very impressed with Bentonville. It's been pretty widely talked about among the coaches and media people that I've talked to that, Melissa just looks unstoppable, and that, there's no doubt why they're the number 1 team in the country. And, just a lot of coach talk, things like that, about how dominant they are. And for Bentonville to go down there and just, give them all that they wanted, competed down to the last out, had bases loaded and a chance to actually take the lead there, had the runners on base, base hit there could have either tied it up or taken the lead. Huge deal. And definitely, without a doubt, Bentonville earned a tremendous amount of respect, not only here in Arkansas, but, on the national stage. I would be really surprised if Bentonville doesn't move up the national rankings after that close game. I would think that they would probably jump up 2 or 3 more spots after competing that well with the number 1 team in the country.
Say that they certainly have I can't disagree with you on that, because you think about two of their 2 losses have come to the number 1 team in the country and a team in Calvary Baptist, Louisiana, that some have as number 2 in the entire country. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that you could probably make the argument if they win one of those games between Melissa and Calvary Baptist, you got a really strong argument that they could be top 5. But I wouldn't be shocked if they're rideouts, because I think they came in at 14 is the highest that I saw this week, and it wouldn't shock me if they're maybe 11 or 12. That's probably what would be the smart thing to do. But I did have a chance to catch up with Coach Kent Early from Bentonville after the game. I got about 2.5-minute video that we'll run here. I do apologize about Coach Early's audio. It was pretty windy out there, so his is a little bit tough to hear, a little muffled, but should be able to make it out. But just kind of talking about like what went wrong, the 2 innings in particular that really, as far as defensively and everything, that just kind of went wrong for them, that led to Melissa scoring those 5 runs. But we'll get into that and then we'll analyze that a little bit once that's over. Here with Bentonville head coach Kent Early following a very hard-fought loss 5-3 to the Melissa Cardinals. Coach, really look outside. Maybe I know there was one swing, the home run in the 2nd inning, and then the 3rd inning a few things got away, but I mean, you got to be very pleased with the way your girls came down and competed.
Very pleased. They did compete. We talk all the time, pressure is a privilege, and we had some pressure right there in those first inning 2 and inning 3. We give up a home run and we make an error. but the kids fought back, and Darby had a key strikeout there in the 5th inning. She got 2 drop balls there, had a key strikeout. We get the next 2, and then she exploded her neck and gutted it out the rest of the way. And then we rallied for it a little bit. We scored 2 in the 7th frame. I mean, we're on the national stage competing, obviously the best team in the country, and I thought we did our part.
And talking about Darby, I think it was in the 5th, she gave up that leadoff triple and then got out of that. Really good pop out, on the catch by Kylie as well. But just talk about her resilience. Darby had some things happen that was tough, but she just really seemed to come through it.
Absolutely. We talk all the time, and it's coach speak. It's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. And she reacted very good. I mean, she just rode her neck and got it done. And, the other thing is, with all of this, nothing's going to prepare us for the state tournament like this game. And I thought the kids responded to the atmosphere and the pressure. I thought it was great. And I'm just really glad we were here and really glad we were in this situation, because I don't think anything can prepare us any more than that right there.
And talk about how much this week really, and I know you still got a little bit, you got a few games left till the state tournament, but playing Harbor, playing Rogers, and then coming down here and playing this team. I mean, how many steps do you think you maybe took this week? I
think it's huge. We had 2 barn burners with Rogers and Harbor. And, I thought we were running a little bit on adrenaline there for a little bit. But I'm extremely proud, because after we gave up the 2 and the 3 right there, I mean, we put up some zeros. And that's how we play, and I'm just extremely proud they did it on this stage.
That's what I was going to mention, too, is the 7th inning. You load the bases, and then you still have them loaded, there. And so, I mean, you're coming down right to the wire. So, there were some times where the bats were a little bit quiet. Still a low-scoring game between both of them. But you think about what Melissa's done is I think they've allowed 24 runs the total year. So just to be able to come back and fight like that, especially down to your final out.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's what the big moments are for, and you're just happy to see your kids respond. I'm super proud of them.
So, again, that was Bentonville head coach Kent Early. Basically just talked about the main points of the game. And Jared, Bentonville actually got off to a really good start. They loaded the bases, and then a hit by pitch. Actually, I think Violet Nguyen was on third, and then a hit by pitch ended up walking her in. So start off 1-0, and then Darby sets them down in order. Darby Burnett, the junior Texas A&M commit, set them down in order in the first inning, in the bottom half, and then the bottom half of the second is when Melissa hit that 2-run homer, and things kind of really got away from Bentonville in the third, because they had a couple of walks, they had an error. You heard Coach Early mention that. So really 2 innings was the difference in that one. And then they did. Now, there was a couple of other times where Melissa threatened, just like there was with Bentonville. Really, after the third, though, neither team for 2 innings had a runner in scoring position. And then that was probably the most impressive, was at the top of the 5th, or I guess it was the bottom of the 5th inning. Darby gave up a leadoff triple and still got out of it. Didn't give up a single run out of that. So really, you look at the second and third innings, particularly that third, even though in the second they gave up a home run, I would think it was particularly that third inning that really just kind of, I don't know that I want to say did them in, because they were right there at the end at the 7th. But if you really, you think about if they don't commit that error, what possibly could have happened. But again, we can sit here and we can break it down and we can say it's the parts that went wrong. But I think that really we've just got a Bentonville team that went down to the wire with a really good squad and just came up a little bit short, is simply what it was.
Well, just like the inning you were talking about there, where she gave up the leadoff triple and then worked out of it. I'm going to tell you, the more I see and hear out of Darby Burnett, the more impressed I am. And I wasn't super familiar with her, and I probably should have been, but Northwest Arkansas is probably my weakest area of the state as far as knowing so many kids by name and knowing them personally. But the more I've seen out of her and stats I've seen out of her and the situational stuff I've seen, there's probably been 5 times now this year that I've been keeping up with Bentonville stuff and seeing where she gave up a leadoff hit or ended up with a runner on base leading off an inning. Just like this, she has had a runner on third with nobody out against a really good team. How do they not score? Well, she dug deep and went to work and worked herself out of it. That's the kind of grit and heart that makes someone a really special pitcher, besides just being really talented. They just have that determination that they're going to go do whatever it takes to work back out of that situation. And to me, that's why you see kids like her going to major colleges to play at the next level. It's as much about talent, but it's as much about mental toughness and heart and grit, and everything I'm seeing out of her. She's got it all.
I was thinking about it on my way back from Texas. You think about all the talent up in Northwest Arkansas, Brinkley Moore, just in all classifications, Brinkley Morton. Of course, you've got CC Dots, Sierra Dots at Springdale Harbor, Emory Bolin at Pea Ridge, which we'll talk both about Emory and Brinkley as we get down to the lower classifications. Dalen Osborne at Rogers. It's time to put now. Darby was injured last year, and she's only been pitching for 4 years. That's what makes it even crazier. She's been this is like her 4th year pitching, and already committed to a P4. It's time to put her in the conversation. And I know, again, like last year she was injured, and it was kind of the Ryan Sanders show for the most part. It should have been. I mean, Ryan was exceptional, but I mean, Darby's in that conversation with the best of the best, and had 9 strikeouts. She ended up matching the 27 pitcher for Lisa Mays, who also struck out 9, pitched really well. Lulu Adrian, I almost said Anderson. Lulu Adrian for Melissa, 3 for 3, had that leadoff triple that I talked about. Also, Paisley Needham smacked that 2-run homer that I talked about just a second ago. Aniston Wright, as how you pronounce it, for Bentonville, 2 for 2. Also, Demi Donahoe notched multiple hits, going 2 for 4. And then, as I said, Burnett struck out the 9 and went the distance. Both her and Mays went the distance for a complete game. Also, too, wanted to give a shout out Ava Stymus and Taylor Crisp. They both had 2 back-to-back key pinch hits there in the 7th. That Ava's, I think there was 3 on, or there was 2 on her and somebody else, and then Crisp. No, I'm sorry. Ava was the one I'm pretty sure that loaded the bases, and then Crisp ended up getting a hit that drove in the 3rd run. So 2 huge pinch hits right there from both of them, and again, just an overall great performance from Bentonville. Do want to thank Ozark Women's Specialty Group out of Bentonville. Very much appreciate them for stepping up and being a big part of this and making all of what we were able to do possible with the photos and everything. Give a quick second of love to them. Ozark's Women's Specialty Group, they are led by Dr. Amy Fry and Dr. Katie Bill. And out of Bentonville, I said, they provide compassionate, evidence-based care for women of all ages. Their mission is to empower with the knowledge and tools necessary to lead healthy lives. Their physicians are board-certified experts in their fields, providing some of the best care in Northwest Arkansas with consideration, knowledge, and attention to detail that are unparalleled. With a comprehensive list of women's health services available, patients are easily able to seek the care they need. Call 479-250-4258 to schedule an appointment to experience the Ozark Women's Specialty difference. And that is, again, 479-250-4258. Also, Burke Transportation Services out of Northwest Arkansas played a big role in that as well. So really appreciate those that stepped up and made this possible. And then also, as I said, we got the photo gallery on our social media pages as well that you can go check out. So, all right, all that now down to Class 5A. Couple of notable games from last week, Jared. Maumelle and Greenbrier split. Maumelle won the first game 6-2, and then Greenbrier took the second one 4-3. We've talked about Greenbrier all year, and they're still fighting for that. You know, there's still a few teams that are in that Central Conference that are going to be fighting for that final spot. And, you know, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 that are left out, 1 or 2 teams that could beat a lot of other teams in multiple other conferences just because that conference is so loaded. Speaking of the Central, also, BB and Sylvan Hills split. We talked about Sylvan Hills, how we know that they're good. They've had a good season record-wise, but they just haven't gotten that first big win that you're just kind of like, okay, finally, you know, they've gotten one that not necessarily that they're not supposed to win, but that they don't go into, and you're just kind of like, okay, we expect them to put up a lot of runs and probably win this game handily. They beat BB 10-0 in the first game, so not only did they beat him, they shut him out pretty much with authority. And then BB came back and won the second game 7-2. Also in that mix, Greene County Tech beat Maumelle 2-0 on Thursday. Isabel Matthews had a big game, went the distance for 7 innings, allowed only 3 hits, walked 1, and struck out 12. Also, Benton swept BB on Thursday, and then Sheridan Sheridan actually lost 2 games this week. I would say this was probably the first time Sheridan lost 2 games in a week. I was going to say it was since 2023, but I think last year they lost to Bryant and then Bauxite like 2 days later. So it's the first time in about a year they've lost consecutive games in the same week, as Sheridan fell to Monticello, which we'll talk about that game a little bit once we get down to 4A. And then Fayetteville on Friday. The Purple Dogs, actually, Sheridan was leading that one, and then the Purple Dogs put a 5 spot on the Lady Jackets in the 4th, and then 4 runs up in the 6th. So just kind of got away from them there on that Friday matchup. But those were pretty much the scores that I had to recap. I'll get some of your take on that, and then anything else you want to add.
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but man, the 5A Central, golly, it's just.
We'll pull up the standings for that real quick.
That's what I was going to say. I don't even know what the current standings are, because the last I looked, they weren't updated with all of the games in there. They're still missing a couple of games, but Benton looks really good right now. And then you look, to me, Sylvan, I really thought, we talked about this, I really thought Sylvan was going to be competing for that 2nd or 3rd spot here in the Central, and they're right there. They're just off the fringe of that. BB has looked great all year, and then kind of struggled this week. But I don't know that it's that they struggled. It's just really good teams they're playing. Benton's outstanding. Sylvan Hills we knew was going to be strong and found a way to get it done. And then I think they lost early in the week to Pea Ridge, or last weekend to Pea Ridge. Was that a 1-0 game that they lost to Pea Ridge? BB's a really good softball team with 2 really good pitchers and a lot of firepower. And I had a couple people ask me, "Hey, what's up with BB? Why are they losing 3 or 4 games in a week?" I was like, "Have you looked at who they played?" Like, it's a gauntlet. It's just a murderer's row of great teams to play in a week's time or 8 days time or whatever it was, against some of the best pitchers in the state too. Sylvan Hills got Zamari Ball, and a lot of people don't realize how good Zamari Ball is when she's really on. She's doing a really great job. She's a good hitter too. Just a lot of talent there at Sylvan Hills. I think BB's going to be fine. They're going to work through a little bit that they had here, and I think they're going to be strong down the stretch too. But that 5A Central, I'm going to listen and see if you've got an updated where the standings are, because the last time I looked, I know there was at least 2 games missing off the standings I looked at. You're muted.
My bad. Forgot to unmute myself. So Benton, I think these are updated. Benton 18-2, 11-0, Valonia 14-3. I'm just going to say the conference record. So Valonia is at 8-1. Now Valonia still they played Maumelle, but Valonia I think has Sylvan Hills this week. They've still got to play Benton, so I still have to play BB. So we'll see what happens with the Eagles there. And I think actually this week, Coach Kevin Sullivan has a chance to surpass 400 career wins. Well, not all of those are at Valonia. He's, I think, Horatio somewhere else, and then Bologna next after that. But yeah, has a chance to, I'm pretty sure he's looking at 400 this week. But Bologna is in second right now. BB is in third, 2.5 games back. Sylvan Hills is 3 games back. So if the playoffs started the state tournament started today, Maumelle would be left out. Now, however, Maumelle, they've played Benton, and Sylvan Hills hasn't played Benton yet. And so Sylvan Hills, since Sylvan Hills and Maumelle split, then I guess since Maumelle was swept by Benton in their series, then Maumelle actually is a half game back of the final spot. And then Greenbrier is at that 6th spot. And that's pretty much – that's your central right there. I mean, that's what we probably expected it would be, those 6 teams fighting for it. Little Rock Christian is at the 7th spot right now. And really, like, they've struggled a lot this year, losing Gwen Hall. Gwen was obviously a huge part of what they did, both in the circle and at the plate. So those 6 teams, and going in order, Benton, Bologna, BB, Sylvan Hills, Maumelle, and Greenbrier, that's the teams that we expected. So, I mean, yeah, we could say it's beating a dead horse, but really it's just kind of what we expected from the get-go. I don't know. I will say that I felt like Greenbrier would probably be a little bit higher. Now, again, they started off, I think they played BB and Benton. That was like their first two conference series that they played. So the fact that theirs was pretty front loaded, that does bode well for Greenbrier down in the final few weeks here. But that's exact. We knew that there was going to be at least one, possibly two teams get left out of state. And it's looking like it's going to be two.
You're definitely going to lose two teams that are very deserving, that are quality teams out of that Central. It's kind of like the SEC West in football. It's just really, you've heard me reference that before for a couple of other conferences. It's just, man, they just beat each other up. They chew each other up, and you just got to see who's tough enough to come out of it. And then you look around a little bit more, look around 5A. You've got 3 or 4 other really good teams that I'm interested to see what they do down the stretch here, getting ready to go towards state tournament. In Greenwood and Whitehall and Greene County Tech. Farmington is very interesting to me. Farmington has been a power and been in the top 5, so many times, and they're not that much out of it now. But I really feel like we're either fixing to see Farmington really take off and get after some people and kind of prove that they deserve to be up there in that top 7 or so conversation, or we're going to see if they really have it or not. I kind of feel like I think Farmington is starting to put some stuff together, and that's just a gut feeling for me, but I just feel like they're starting to put some stuff together, and we're fixing to see them win 3 or 4 pretty good ball games.
I wholeheartedly agree. We've talked about how they could be a little bit of a ticking time bomb, for lack of a better term, in a good way, in a ticking time bomb for possibly the 5A state tournament. I think, yes, it's going to be. Van Buren's a pretty good team, but I think that conference definitely it's going to be Greenwood and Farmington, which I think Greenwood does have a head-to-head over Farmington already. But regardless of the seeding, I wouldn't be shocked if either one of those teams, Greenwood or Farmington, possibly makes a deep run. They call this Farmington squad the baby birds because they're so young. Then that South, interested to see what I really like what Whitehall has. Yeah, I still think Sheridan can figure some things out. Look, Sheridan's they're definitely filling some of their losses. They're filling some of the players that graduated. They're also, of course, the loss of Mary Lim with the torn ACL injury. So really interested to see what Whitehall can do. They've just continued to play really well, and they've played a really tough schedule. And then in the East, this week we've got a really big matchup. So Greene County Tech hasn't lost since spring break. They're 9-0 since spring break. Had that 2-0 win over Maumelle that I mentioned. Had a really good win over Riverside on Friday. Yes, it's a 5A over a 2A, but Riverside, as we've talked about many times, is a very quality opponent regardless of classification. And then Tuesday, they've got the doubleheader with Valley View. And this is even though Valley View and Marion split, I do think Valley View is a little bit better than Marion. And I think that's probably your two teams. And Greene County Tech is always, they've been the favorite pretty much for the most recent memory, most last few years at least. So that's still my favorite is GCT, but I think that we're going to find out a lot this week. And in particular, because I think GCT plays Marion the first week. That's actually their last conference series on May 6th. And then they'll finish out the regular season, weather permitting, with Benton and Cabot. So the Lady Eagles, it goes without saying, they're going to be tested like crazy down the stretch here.
Yeah, I've been kind of keeping an eye on GCT kind of from a distance. Definitely think that they are starting to put things together again, like you mentioned, 9-0 since spring break, really starting to look like the Greene County Tech of old that the last 2 to 3 years that we've seen. They've always hit the ball well, and they've had exceptional pitchers here and there, and they're starting to put that back together again, starting to look like that massive program that they are. And then going back down to the South, we were talking about Sheridan. I still think Sheridan's gonna win the South. Whitehall is looking good, and then I think you have Arkansas High and maybe Lakeside in the next couple of spots. I'm not sure I think it's Lakeside then Arkansas High. I'm not sure. They may have split, so they may be in a tie for third and fourth. But definitely, we know there's a lot of talent down there at Arkansas High. They're a little off of what they were last year. But you got some really exceptional players individually, Macy Lee and Anaya Arnold and Jules Smart and some of those that they may be able to put something together, make a little run here to make some noise too. But I like Whitehall and what they're doing, and they're looking better and better all the time. And of course, Bethany Roper and I think Taylor Urban and Emma Ratliff, and there's a lot of good talent there too. So interesting to see how that shakes out in the South.
Then in 4A, we've got probably the most to talk about in this one out of any class because, gosh, these rankings were really hard this week, particularly on the back end. But some notable scores that I had was on Monday. Heber Springs had a pretty good week. They beat Lone Oak 8-5 on Monday, a ranked Lone Oak team. Also, Bauxite squeaked past 6A Conway 8-7. Nashville just put now granted, this game was 1-1 with Nashville and Malvern on Monday through 4 innings. And then Nashville. I was thinking of Malvern's game with Bauxite last week. So it was 1-1 through 4 innings. Nashville scores 3 runs in the 5th and then put an 11 spot on the Lady Leopards in the 6th. So yes, it was definitely a trouncing, but it was close for the majority of the game. And then things just kind of got away from the Lady Leopards right after they had gotten their biggest win of the season over Bauxite. Also, Monticello. We'll talk a little bit more about Monticello here in a second, but man, what a huge win over Sheridan, 8-3. That was actually Addie Frazier pitching in that game. Elena Lyle was at first. Of course, if Elena's not pitching, she's usually at first. And so they pitched their number 2 in that game and still won pretty handily. I mean, 5 runs. That's pretty solid. Also on Tuesday, Pottsville, 2-0 over Mena. That was a huge shutout for the Lady Apache. And then Heber got another big win, a conference win over Morrilton, 7-3. And then this is one that's relevant here in a second. So Lone Oak 20-3 over Stuttgart. Probably what you would have expected in that game, but then we'll go a little bit deeper on that here in just a second. Crossett 8-6 over Star City. Caitlin Lindsay, huge game in that one, went 3 for 4 with the home run. I talked about a second ago, Jared, that Sylvan Hills was one of those in 5A that were like, okay, we know they're pretty good, but they need that statement win. That's pretty much the exact same thing that we had said about Crossett. Crossett's had a really good season. They're playing well. I think the 4A8 conference is a lot deeper this year. It was pretty much before. It was Monticello with a little side of Stuttgart. And after that, Star City was tough here and there, but, and they went on that, Star City went on that run late last year. But when you think about Crossett, Star City, Monticello, even Warren some on depending on what day it is. I mean, they like that top 4 is pretty solid in that conference. But then also Wednesday, Brooklyn 4-2 over Westside Consolidated. The Lady Bearcats, they're looking back about like the team that we thought they could be. I think they've won 5 in a row. I'm not since losing 3, either 4 or 5 in a row since losing 3 straight. And then Stuttgart on Thursday. So Stuttgart falls to Lone Oak. This is softball right here. Falls to Lone Oak 20-3 and then beats Lone Oak 5-3. Yeah, that's just kind of where we're at right now. So I'll get your reaction on any of that stuff that I just talked about. And then we'll of course talk about the 1-2 matchup between Pea Ridge and Gentry.
Well, the first thing I'll say is when you start looking at those back-to-back games where there's a really lopsided game and then there's it flips on his head and the other team wins and things like that. Sometimes when you get into these double headers, you got that ace that throws that first game and, they go at it and they go out there and they play with everything they got. And then you burn up a lot of pitching to get that victory. And then you turn around and you don't have a lot of pitching left for a second game. But there's, any given day in softball. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's same day games or if it's 3 days apart or anything else. Anytime a team can show up or not show up. I mean, we had a game we just didn't show up for. The loss that we have this year. We just didn't show up and we weren't ready for that game. And it got us, And it's one of those deals that any given day you are talking about teenage girls here, and you never know what
teenage girls during prom season.
Yes, absolutely. During prom season, the end of the year, a lot of these girls are seniors. They're looking at not only prom but graduation and all the things. It's really easy to lose focus. But to get into the softball side of all of that, man, there's so much talent in programs. When you look at these like Malvern and Bauxite and Nashville and Mena and Pottsville, there's so much talent, and there's so many teams that are so close together in talent and pitching and everything else. All it takes is for one error or one mistake or one kid to not have their normal day, and it can flip the entire standings on its head because it can change everything. Earlier in the year, you were talking about Pottsville earlier. Mena beats Pottsville, then you flip it, Pottsville beats Mena. Malvern gets a huge win and then turns around and gets it handed to them. It's so crazy to look at what can happen in the standings, and 4A seems to be the craziest of the bunch this year.
It is.
As far as who's beating who and when, and they've been all over the place. You made the comment earlier about Monticello and that big win over Sheridan. I'm going to tell you, Monticello has been a really, really good team for several years. They are loaded with hitters. They've got 2 outstanding pitchers. And I'm going to be honest with you, outside of some injuries that kind of set them back a little bit at the first this year, and I think they've got at least one of them back, they're starting to look like the Monticello that they have the last couple of years. And I really think that everybody better kind of look out for the Monticello monster that's coming for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I knew that Monticello was still going to be pretty good, even with the injuries that they had. I think Libby Kingston, I know she's back because she had a home run, like 1 or 2 home runs last week, but I think she was one of the ones that was injured at the beginning. But you talked about Pottsville and Mena. Mena was like, that was going to be without question, that's kind of, that game was what caused probably some of the more debate with the rankings, because you're thinking about it and you're like, okay, who's going to be, one of our final 2 outside looking in teams? And it would have been a no-brainer in that case, because they had the head-to-head over Pottsville, they had the win over Nashville, and they've been playing pretty well overall. But then you look at that Pottsville team that got that shutout and has had some pretty good wins and looked really good at parts of the season. And we've talked a little bit about Hebrews, or actually most of the season Pottsville has, but we've also talked about how, I think I've mentioned it more on the preview pod, and you touched on it maybe during spring break when we had like kind of the midway point. Heber Springs, we felt like was going to get hot at some point, and they were playing really well. I think they had a loss to Harding Academy last week, which, look, I'm not going to hold that one against. It's a 3A over a 4A, but a third-ranked 3A over 4A. So I think Heber's definitely in that mix too. Brooklyn, to me, I think this is going to be where they're going to keep going with what they've done. I felt like that 3-game skid that they had, that was going to be like probably the point in the season where you're like, all right, things are going a little rough right now, but not much bad things that you can say other than that. I mean, I think that they are really going to go on a tear in this second half. So there's just Gravett is another one of those sometimes that you're just kind of like, I mean, yeah, Gravett's again played really tough competition. I still think they're a quality team, but can they stay consistent? Now they played Harbor last week. They played like multiple 6A schools. Like they played some really tough teams. And so, if they can stay healthy and get healthy, stay healthy, and especially by the time state tournament time rolls around, who knows? But 2 teams that there is no question who pretty much, or at least who the number 1 team is in 4A right now. I still think, regardless of the result, to me, Gentry's probably the number 2 team, but hands down, Pea Ridge is the number 1 team in the state right now. We've had them ranked number 1. I think Pea Ridge has been ranked number 4 or number 1 in 4A. I think all of the last 2 years, minus when Farmington got it in the final regular or the final season standings after they won state. I mean, Pea Ridge has held that title and they've lived up to it. but they beat Gentry, their 4A1 rival, 7-0 on Thursday. Emory Boland pitched it. She was great all of last week, but particularly in this game, complete game. And just allowed 2 hits. She gave up they gave up the 1 run. It wasn't earned. She walked 3 and then struck out 16 and went for 2 for 3 with an RBI. Also, Lexi Vigil, 3 for 4, and a couple of others had multiple hits. So, Jared, I'll go ahead and say the elephant in the room. I know that really over the past few seasons, we know how good Pea Ridge has been. But there's been like one of the things that someone might say is, oh, well, like when they play really good competition, they're not always the best at hitting. I look at the end of the state championship last year. They put up 5 runs in the final frame, put up 7 runs against a really good Gentry team. I mean, I'm sure, just like with any team, you could probably point to a game here or a game there where, their bats maybe let them down a little bit. But I think especially when you look at last year's state championship and then you look at this game, this has been the best team that Pea Ridge has seen in 4A. They've played obviously some upward competition, beat BB. They lost to, I think it was Rogers. But I think that narrative, I don't even know if I want to call it a narrative because it's just, maybe 1 or 2 that says it here and there. But I think this whole thing about Pea Ridge not hitting, that's kind of just really a bunch of baloney at this point.
Well, sometimes people just like to talk to hear themselves talk. So, I have no question about who the best team in 4A is right now. I mean, I think that was pretty well proven this week. And, they're a really good defensive team. They have great pitching. And every time I look at a score, they've put up 5 to 8 runs, pretty consistently. So, I feel like they're hitting the ball pretty well, and I've seen them put up 5 to 8 runs against 3 or 4 really outstanding pitchers this year too. So I don't think it's a matter of like, oh, they're playing weak pitching and putting up 10 runs, and they're playing strong pitching and putting up 1 or 2. They're putting up 5, 6, 7, 8 runs against really good pitchers also. So everything that I'm looking at, every time I look at scores and look at who's doing what, Pea Ridge to me is the best team in 4A right now in the state. And yes, there are 3 or 4 really talented teams that are not far off of them. But for just total complete teams, I think Pea Ridge has that. Obviously, Emory Boland had a really big week this week. Pitched just lights out. I think she had 30, maybe 39 strikeouts in 3 games this week against a loaded field. They going back to a win over BB. Had to win over Gentry, and I'm going brain dead on who the third one was. Was it Gravett this week? You're muted, I think, Kyle.
Oh, you know what? I unmuted and then muted again. I think it was Gravett or Rogers Heritage, maybe.
I think it was Gravett.
I can't remember.
They had 3 solid teams to beat this week. They got that done. She pitched outstanding. She's definitely looking like her old self and just throwing the heck out of the ball.
Yeah, so they beat Gravett, Gentry, and Bentonville West. I knew they played a 6A team. I couldn't remember if it was Heritage or West.
Yeah. Well, so in the last 4 games, they beat 4 really good quality teams. Just they're doing their job, and she's doing her job, and they've got a lot of depth there. Got a really solid second pitcher behind her. I feel like they've got the depth and the talent to go win the whole thing in 4A this year. Not to say that there's not 3 or 4 other teams that are very capable of getting it done on any given day, but as far as just who's the best team in the classification, it's them. Gentry is a really good softball team, and I think they're going to win a lot of games. And on any given day, I think they could beat Pea Ridge, but it wasn't their day this week when they played. And quickly, something I meant to touch on in 4A a while ago, and I didn't, and you brought them up. Brooklyn is definitely playing very well right now. The last 3 or 4 games have really started to look like the team that we thought they might be earlier in the year. Amaya Curry is amazing, and I think it's Aspen Heckett-Thorne is throwing the ball really well. And, Kennedy Brooks is a really solid little ball player, and you probably mentioned 3 or 4 others, but they're just they're starting to look like the team that we talked about early in the first couple of shows that we thought they were going to be really strong over there. and they're starting to show that part. It took them a little longer than I thought it would, but they're turning it on too.
Yeah, those freshmen have really come on. When you talk about Brooks lead off and Amaya Curry, I think Amaya is I think she bats second. She's in the 2 or 3 hole in the circle. She's taking some lumps. When you're playing Bentonville, you're playing Tuckerman, you're playing something. I know Tuckerman's 2A against 4, but still really good team there. You're going to take some lumps. And that's what we had talked about, like right around that time when they had that tough showing, and then they won their first game in the Ozarks Classic, but then lost to Tuckerman and Bentonville. We had talked about how we felt like they were going to be fine, and that's what I had in my notes. So in the rankings, like I made a note from the 4A rankings, and then after number 4, I just put because I think Brooklyn is probably playing like a top 5 team right now. But then you think about Lone Oak losing, you think about Star City losing twice. Then the outside looking in is it's right now. I think it's really just this is how softball and baseball are, but like it's just about what day it is. I mean, I just don't even know right now. All I know is that Pea Ridge is the number 1 team, and then the rest is going to take care of itself. So as we go on down to 4A here, to 3A. I don't have a lot from 3A this week. I've just got a couple of scores that were notable. Mayflower shut out Lamar that was 3A 5 action, 5-0 on Monday. Glen Rose, how about the Lady Beavers? 5-4 over Atkins. Speaking of the 3A 5, so that made the 3A 5 race a little bit more interesting. Harding Academy, we talked about that game that they beat. I mentioned Heber Springs lost 5-2 to them, so that's a really big win there for the Lady Wildcats. A couple of individual accomplishments here, of course. Brinkley Morton from Lincoln got her 1,000th strikeout of her career. Anytime you hit it, I haven't seen that very many times. I know that we'll mention in a second that Mackenzie Freeman, she also hit a milestone at Hackett last week, but 1,000 career there for the Mississippi State commit, Brinkley Morton. Also, too, shout out to her. I really like the fact that the Lincoln Facebook or social media pages put her and Addie Purcell, her catcher, together. Love that, to see the battery mates getting some. I know you're really good about that with is it Baum that is Cutter's catcher?
Yeah, Baum.
Kalen Baum. You're always really good about pubbing, talking about Jaylee's stuff and how well they mesh together. And so really cool to get for. I know Addie's played multiple positions. I mean, she's a name that we've talked about for a long time. Played a lot of innings for the Lady Wolves, as Brink has, obviously, but also Mountain View's Emma Day had a massive week too. 3-2 win over Flippin. She struck out 20, which I think that tied her own record, if I'm not mistaken, for a single game. Then had 14 against Marshall. Then she struck out 10 against Yellville Summit and also went 3 for 3 at the plate. So that was another really big individual performance that I saw this week. But yeah, I think Brink is about Aline and in the time that I've covered. So I think covered like statewide, which is not that long. I think we've maybe had one, but there's not a whole lot of people that have 1,000 career strikeouts. I mean, 800 or more is essentially phenomenal. I mean, that's just really good. So hitting the 4 figures, that's just kind of a different level.
Yeah, to touch on that with Brinkley Morton, that's an outstanding number. Lexi Franklin, I think last year passed 1,000 for her career. That was another one. I think there's 2 others, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's 4 now in the record books that have 1,000 or more now that Brinkley's in that club. And then you see a big drop pretty fast. You only have a couple more that are in the 8 or 900s. About 700 puts you in the top 10 in the state now, all time. We were looking at that a little bit earlier when Jaylee passed her 700th, and now she's working on 800. And now you've got several pitchers in the state that are up there very high in those numbers. As you mentioned, Mackenzie Freeman is over 900 now. I don't know the exact numbers, but you've got Lily Faye McWhirter and Emery Bolin and 2 or 3 others that are going to be really high career numbers when they finish up. Kaylee McDonald's well on her way to having really high numbers. So several of those are going to be in the record books when it's said and done. But to have 1,000 like Brinkley has and still have she's probably going to put up another 50 or 60 this year before the year's over. She's just an incredible talent, incredible kid, just a great young lady, and that needs to be really celebrated. When these kids work as hard as they work and put up those kind of numbers for a 4-year high school career is just incredible. And just I'm blown away by it, and huge props. Not to take anything away from Mackenzie Freeman, huge props to her for passing 900 this week. That's another one, and she very well, depending on how deep they run into state tournament and everything, she might have a chance to get to 1,000 before she's finished. So definitely some incredible milestones for some talented kids.
That was a great seg into 2A because we'll start it there because Hackett, that was a 12-0 win over Hector that Mackenzie went over 900. And also the Lady Hornets had a win over a pretty good, touched on Van Buren when we were talking about 5A, but a 2A over a 5A got that win. So really big deal there. Let's see what else we got. CAC 3-2 over. Now CAC had the pretty much the slugfest with Mount Vernon and Nola a day or two later, but got a big 3-2 win over Bigelow. Kayla Myers 3 for 3 in that game with 2 runs scored. Also struck out 7 in the circle, and 4 other Lady Mustangs notched multiple hits. I think Kayla's their leadoff. I think I saw that their 1 through 4. They pretty much almost went perfect. It was close to it. All of them had multiple hits. It was either 1 through 4 or 1 through 5. All of them had multiple hits, but I'm pretty sure it was around 8 for 8 or something around that range. So really good night there for the Lady Mustangs. We'll see what they can do down the stretch here. They were the kind of the Cinderella team in 2A last year that got hot at the right time, and we'll see what they can do with that. Also, you mentioned Kaylee McDonald a second ago. Big win they got their second win over the Carlisle Bison on Monday. I was couldn't remember if that was a Monday or Tuesday game. 3-0. The Buckner sisters, Ember, I think they are sisters, either sisters or cousins, but Ember and Kimber combined to go 4 for 7. Both also hit a double, as did Kaylee, who also struck out 11 batters in a 2-hit complete shutout. And also cannot forget those Cutter Lady Eagles. We touched on it at the beginning of the show. Big time excitement for Cutter right now, Jared. These girls are doing things that possibly we don't think anybody else in school history is, especially if you guys beat Mountain Pine tonight, then that will likely be something that's never been done in school history. But nonetheless, they're doing things that aren't seen around Cutter very often.
Well, definitely not in the softball world. We've done very well this year and playing with some underclassmen in some new positions and just throwing them into the frying pan. But they've performed and come through in big spots, and our senior class is loaded with leaders. You've got Jaylee in the circle, and she's throwing as good as she's ever thrown in her life. Outside of a couple of innings at Murfreesboro this year, she's just been pretty outstanding. And she had a great game against Foreman Friday. Struck out 17. Just looked really good in circle. But I'm going to tell you, Kaylin Baum behind the plate helps her to look really good. Kaylin Baum has been an absolute wall back there. Jaylee's really good about bouncing change-ups or screwballs in the dirt, and she has just been a complete wall, keeping everything in front of her, throwing kids out on the bases pretty regular. She's been such a stable force back there for 4 years for Jaylee. We've got Haley Campbell has just been knocking the cover off the ball. Our center fielder, Jaden Barrett, our first baseman's doing amazing. Veronica Sapp's done a great job at short for us. Just everywhere you look, Skylar Sharp at third. Cutter's doing some stuff that they haven't done in a really long time. They've never done as far as winning the conference and especially going undefeated in the conference. But they're really starting to play well and sitting at 14-1 and 6-0. Hopefully after today be 7-0 in conference. It's a chance for these girls to really have a chance to do something in softball that we haven't done. Cutter's been known for being a really big basketball school and going to state a lot in basketball, but I'm hoping we're going to find a way to get the state tournament in softball now too.
Yeah, that's an intriguing conference. I mean, we touched on it last week, but you got a good Horatio team, you got a good Foreman. There's some really good pitching in particular. I mean, you got I know that y'all are hitting the ball really well, and but between Jay Lee, Abercrombie, and then doesn't Horatio's got a pretty good one too, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know for sure her first name, but her last name I believe is Williamson. She looked really good against us. I was very impressed with her. So yeah, there's those three are really solid in the circle, and I'm gonna tell you, Murfreesboro has really impressed me with their bats. Even though they haven't had the greatest season overall, they've got 5 or 6 just loaded hitters in that lineup. So for them to be sitting down right now, they're sitting in the 4 spot in our conference. And to go back and touch on a little bit of what you touched on in the rest of 2A, I'm a little interested to see what CAC does down the stretch. I would never count them out because they were kind of in the same spot last year. They hadn't looked great during the main part of the season. They won like 3 conference games right at the end of the year to get back into the kind of in the talk of the conference a little bit, and then they just went on a tear starting in district tournament. And unfortunately, we were the victims of that. But they took off, and from the time that they came back and beat us in the last inning, in the 7th inning, after we were up 6-1, they just rattled off, game after game, that they just looked untouchable all the way to, I think they made it to state semifinals. I mean, they were rolling. So I wouldn't put anything past CAC because they may be finding that groove and getting in it again for another run this year. Of course, Hackett and Woodlawn and Quitman and Des Arc and, Tuckerman, Riverside, all those teams are looking really good right now. So Carlisle has had a really solid season. So it's going to be up in the air. And I'll tell you, in our conference, Horatio, Foreman, both are really good, but Horatio is a very complete team. Really good hitters, really good defense, and a solid pitcher. They're going to be a force for us to have to deal with all the way through district tournament and on.
And then last but not least in Class 1A, just a notable move in the outside looking in this week. Sacred Heart will flip with Nemo Vista, or Sacred Heart will take the place of Nemo Vista after a 10-4 victory. Also in the 1A2, some scores, and we'll, of course, talk about the Scranton Westside game, but Concord beat Calico Rock 4-0. So Concord's kind of solidified that number 4 spot, really just kind of showing that they are, when you look past Taylor, Scranton, Westside, Concord is really showing to be that next team. Westside beat Calico Rock 21-7, and then Westside also beat Viola 12-2. So for the most part, the Westside Lady Eagles had a pretty good week, but in a non-conference matchup that, who knows, these two could see each other again in the state tournament. They've been 2 of our top 3 teams all year, but Scranton, look, Jared, they've got a very strong case to be number 1. They do. Now, I mean, as long as Taylor's winning and they're still beating 1A competition, it's just, you can't take that away from them, just what they've earned for so long. But I mean, this Scranton team, and I know even a little bit more about them than I do, but they're really freaking good. I mean, 12-6 over, I think it was at Westside, if I'm not mistaken. Brecken Maynor struck out 8, went 4 for 5 with a double and a triple, 2 RBI. Her sister Delaney was 3 for 4, scored 2 runs. Addie Lays hit a home run, and Westside got some good production as well. Addie Overturf was 3 for 4 with a triple and a home run. Mandy Smith, Laney Gentry, and Ashlyn Cossey also notched multiple hits. So this is still a really good Westside team. They are a really good team still, and they're loaded just like we expected them to be, with getting some of those and this would have been a good team even if they didn't get some of the Concord girls, and then also Addie Overturf coming in from Shirley. But I still think, without question, this is a top 3 team in Class 1A, maybe top 2 on their best day. Who knows? We'll see maybe down the line. But nonetheless, this was big time for Scranton, and that just goes without saying.
Well, you've heard me say probably 7 or 8 times now that Scranton is a really good softball team in 1A. I've mentioned the Maynor sisters several times, especially now they're splitting a lot of time pitching. It's a really it's a 1-2 punch for sure, and it's really different pitching styles. So it's not like one similar to the other one. They're very different in pitching styles. One has just unbelievable spin. One has a lot of power and some spin. Just a lot of different things with those two in the circle. And their bats have been really solid. And I don't have my notes close enough to see them, but one of the ones that I remember seeing with hits in several different games, the Croft girl for Scranton has had several hits in games that I've managed to look at their box score. And there's at least two others that I'm drawing a blank on right now from Scranton that's hitting the ball really well. But they look really good, and they definitely have an argument for number one in Class 1A. I don't think you can take that away from Taylor unless Taylor has a loss in 1A. But I definitely think Scranton has got a really good softball team. Westside, without a doubt, we've talked all year about they have talent. And I think there's a good chance that they get on a roll right here going down the stretch. I think they're playing overall. They're playing a little better and a little better and a little better. They're kind of finding that groove. They were really late to come into it because all the basketball girls and everything. And you could kind of see that the first 2 or 3 games they looked pretty rusty and didn't look like the team that we were talking about with all that talent. But each game they play, it seems like they find a little bit more and they gel a little bit more. And so I think Taylor, Scranton, Westside, Concord, maybe Bradley, there's 4 to 5 teams that are going to be in that conversation to be playing in the last, in the semifinals or the finals of state. But right now, if I was having to pick who would be at the state championship, and who knows how the bracket sets up, but I'm thinking Taylor and Scranton would make a really good game and it'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, I do too, because I don't think that last spring state championship was like the score. I don't think that was because Taylor was just that much better. They were a better team, but I don't think it was because they were that much better. Just like in 2024 or 2023, when they smoked Bradley. Bradley had beaten them 2 other times that year. It wasn't because they were that much better. I think the lights were just a little bit. And Bradley, even people from a coach from Bradley has told me that the lights were just a little bit too bright. Taylor's used to being there. And I think that's kind of how it went. And look, and that's no knock. That's just, look, it's natural. Taylor's been there since every year since minus 2020 because of COVID. They've been there every year since 2020. And it's just a whole other kind of atmosphere when you're the last 2 teams remaining. It's already one thing when you get to the postseason, it's already enough pressure. But when you're the final 2 teams standing, you're on statewide TV, every media outlet essentially in the state, because, there's not a ton of media that covers softball. There's others besides us, but there's not a ton of media or a ton of people who cover softball or baseball or anything like that, but they're at state championship games. It's just a whole other kind of pressure because every single eye is on you. So I think now that Scranton has had that chance to experience that, and a lot of these girls are back. I don't even know if Scranton had a single senior last year, maybe one, but I think that's going to make a world of difference. And selfishly, I would actually like to see a rematch of those 2 teams.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be a really good game if that ends up happening. And I'll tell you, I will never bet against Ayla Buford. So I'm going to say that anytime you have Ayla Buford in the circle, you have a chance to win. And they have a program down there that just builds hitters, that builds great defenses, and then you always seem to have 1 or 2 great arms. With Ayla down there, and I think Aniston Nolte is a great second arm behind her. Just everywhere you look on that group, there's quality players too. So, you put a 3-time state tournament or state championship MVP in the circle for a 4th time, odds are she's going to go get it done. But regardless of that, you put a really talented team across from them that's been there a 2nd time now and loaded with the same thing, experience and quality, and 2 great arms in the circle with Brecken and Delaney Maynard. They're both outstanding pitchers. And then you've got a whole supporting cast there of great hitters and defense. Just I think it'll be a really good game if that's what plays out. And then, like I said, if West Side gets back into that conversation with the amount of talent they have, they've got the ability to play with anybody.
Yeah, no question. I mean, any of those three, I think that's it. But yeah, I'm with you. We say it every year until somebody knocks Taylor off. Then it looked like Bradley might be that one a couple years ago, just because I think they played 5 times. They played like twice in the regular season, once in district championship, once in regional, and then in state. And then you're kind of like, okay, well, will Bradley be the one that dethrones them? And I mean, even if they play Scranton again, you can't pick against Taylor until, like I said, somebody proves that you should. But yeah, the Lady Rockets, they are really, really rolling. So yeah, Coach Bateman and her staff, they've done a phenomenal job with that team. I mean, they didn't even have a team 3 years ago. So, but thank you again to Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, Boom Boom Floor Shine, and Chinook Cedary for making this possible. Also, again, Ozark. Let me go back to this to make sure that I say it right, because I don't want to. Ozark Women's Specialty Group in Bentonville. Really appreciate them for stepping up and making sure that we had the proper funds to pay my photographer and our stay and everything like that. So really appreciate the partnership with them, as well as Burke Transportation Services that we were able to give these kids in Bentonville and in the Melissa Cardinals as well, the coverage that they deserve. I mean, this was I was a little bit disappointed. Actually, I was very disappointed in the lack of, I don't think I saw a single Texas TV camera or anything. It is what it is. I know spring sports still take a backseat to everything, but hopefully we'll continue to get better about that, and that will pick up as time goes on and the game continues to grow. But definitely a great weekend down there. Very thankful that I had a chance to do that. And so it's crazy to think about it, Jared, that we're just a couple. We got next week, and then after that, district tournaments start. We're getting down to the wire here.
Yeah, we definitely are. We're definitely getting into the home stretch here. For some of the lower classifications, we have 1 week left, and then districts. For some of the others, we have 2 weeks left, and then you get to state, things like that. I guess there's 2 weeks left, and then state for some of the upper classifications. But it's just that. I'm not ready for it to be over. I'm not ready for us to get into the postseason quite yet. I've been enjoying this regular season and seeing who's beating up on each other and who can get it done week in and week out. There's been a lot of really good performances, individual performances scattered around, and we talked about a lot of the things like the milestones for like Brinkley and Mackenzie Freeman, and some of them, and we've got another one coming up, hopefully real soon here for Jaylee. She's been able to pass 600 and 700 this season, and hopefully within about 3 more games we're going to be talking about passing 800. She's done a lot, and everywhere I turn around, I see some of these pitchers passing milestones now. Girls that are sophomores passing 500, girls that are juniors passing 600, and we talked a little bit earlier about people like Lily Faye McWhirter and Kaylee McDonald. And so I've heard a little bit of talk this week scattered around with some coaches and on social media about strikeout pitchers versus who's the best pitchers. Well, I'm going to tell you, just because you put up a lot of strikeouts doesn't necessarily mean you're the best pitcher. There's definitely some pitchers in 5 and 6A that don't have, record numbers of strikeouts, but they're some of the best pitchers that's ever pitched in the state. But I'll say this, there's some outstanding pitchers in 5A and 6A especially that face such a gauntlet of great hitters that they're not ever going to put up, record numbers of strikeouts. And those kids deserve their due too, just because they're not putting up 900 or 1,000 strikeouts. Dalen Osborne is a really good pitcher. Darby Burnett is a really good pitcher, and there's so many more in that group up there that we can talk about. But there's also some that are getting it done at high levels up there in 3, 4, 5A that are not only winning a lot of games and look outstanding, but they are putting up huge strikeout numbers. So those kids really deserve their props too. And the biggest thing that I would say, and I've heard a lot of debate around this week, with coaches and media and different ones and on social media, just go support kids. Above all else, just go out there and support ladies that are going out there any kid that's out there playing and they're putting up good numbers or they're not putting up good numbers, they're working hard. They're putting in lots of sweat equity and blood and tears. And hey, just go be a fan of every kid out there that's working hard. That's the one thing I'll say about that.
Yeah, no, great point. Yeah, definitely get out and see because as we just said, we're running out of games. We're getting down to the wire here. And this is the time of year when it's starting to get, I mean, this is the time to really get into it because we're getting into postseason play and playing for trophies and all those good things. So definitely stay with us through the rest of the year. We'll have coverage we'll stop the rankings for the playoffs for the state tournaments and all those different things, but we'll have, of course, weekly podcasts and all those good things continuing through the rest of the season. So I guess everything will conclude on Mother's Day weekend. The weekend of champions is when will be the last week for all this. So again, subscribe if you haven't already you can do it on YouTube. You can do it on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio if you prefer the audio platforms, and then also send in your nominations we actually had we probably had more nominations like over the weekend for the team funded player of the week, probably more so than we have all year. We've had a lot. I mean, I think I've gotten probably about 8 or 9 this week. At least, I mean, we usually get them like Sunday to Monday and not that range, usually like Sunday afternoon is when we like to get, most of them in. So had a lot by Saturday. So that was really good I'm actually might be in the double digits by now. So going to have to go through those on Monday and then we'll put those out and of course get the shirts in the mail. But other than that, that'll do it for episode 69 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. Again, thank you all so much for the support. Could not do it without you. So much appreciate that. For Jared Hawthorn and all of us here at Natural State Sports, we will catch you next week.